Okay. Well, while I'm playing Binding of Isaac, there's a question that I wanted to ask anybody that's going to see this video about LOL and AD carry perception, basically, at this period of time. If anybody remembers, at the beginning of the season, Doublelift made comments about how AD carry was basically going to become underpowered, and underpowered enough that it would become unplayed because there would be better choices to go bot lane because AD carries were just too weak, which was probably entirely correct, except that they fixed some issues like lowering the health on Warmogs so that it wasn't an insta-buy OP item, and changing Bork into a item for AD carries to counter health stacking, which is weird that they implemented both changes at once, but it really didn't make AD carries OP necessarily at all. But now, kind of shifting back to the opinion that AD carries are very underpowered as far as that their role is kind of I don't know how it's pronounced in programming. There's a term like where they aren't used because they're just out of date, basically, like some kinds of computer programming functions and stuff are just worse than what something else you could use. And basically that's how I kind of feel like AD carries have become that, because right now almost every mid laner that's played is an assassin if it gets through, but usually it's an assassin every game. So first of all, you have a champion on both sides of the team every game that can one-shot AD carries, not necessarily one-shot like with one spell, but is going to be able to get off a combo that will kill you quickly in team fights. And many times there really isn't much counterplay to this other than your team's own assassin one-shotting the enemy AD carry, and that's about it. Now this might be an issue that mages, or assassins in general, are just too strong. That doesn't really seem to be the case, because they're just essentially fulfilling their purpose in killing AD carries, and that's all really they're intended to do, is to kill a high priority target, either the enemy assassin or mage or the AD carry. But the other issue is that even without the presence of an assassin on either team, which is probably not going to happen in 90% of games, there's usually going to be an assassin on either team. 90% of the time, I would say. The other problem is the types of other champions that are being played. Like, any tanky champion has an incredibly easy time building cheap tank stats. Now, I remember at the start of the season, people complaining that the tank stats were too expensive and everything because of the changes, and like assassins were too strong, but a lot of that stuff was remedied after a while. I can't remember exactly how the meta evolved beyond that in this whole interim period, but there's been nerfs and buffs on various champions. It's made assassins really strong in general. AP assassins are actually generally better than AD assassins, though, which creates a whole host of other problems that are kind of on the periphery of this issue. But you say you have a Nasus on the enemy team. Now, in a competitive environment, sure, somebody could play a counter to Nasus in top lane. That might not necessarily be a simple thing to do, though, because Nasus is just an incredibly strong champion in general. And he could still, even if he's harassed quite a lot and prevented from farming and stuff, he could still scale pretty well. But if Nasus in solo queue is put up against somebody that can't beat him in lane, or is going to let Nasus free farm, he's going to get an armor item, very likely, at the start of the game, and he's going to have 100 plus armor before you even get into the first team fight. And so when you have that first team fight as an AD carry, unless you're just grotesquely fed, or veined, or maybe Kog'Maw on Twitch potentially, you are going to basically be sitting in that fight withered and doing virtually no damage to an enemy team that most likely has two champions that has an item that gives them health and an item that gives them armor at the same time, or one item that gives them both at the same time, in the case of Sunfire Cape. So basically what you're relying on is an AP carry to kill somebody in this situation, almost entirely. You as an AD carry are worthless. You can't do anything in this situation. There's no way you have enough items at this point in the game to be able to accomplish anything to that person that has that much armor. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be an issue, except for the fact that many AD carries do not scale that well into late game, which is weird, but it's true. Unless you're like Vayne or Twitch, who have inborn true damage on their kits. Or Cog. But Cog is... he has a lot of issues with laning in general, that he's not an overall safe pick in many cases. But he actually probably is a lot stronger now. Only because Vayne, Twitch, and Kog'Maw are the only 3 AD carries that scale well enough into the game to the point where they can carry the game late, though. It's late. And even then, because of Assassins being so popular, you can still be one-shot. New Jax can one-shot, in late game can still one-shot AD carries. New Olaf is stupid. Like a top lane Olaf that can actually get farm, and if he gets kills, he becomes an unstoppable death machine, just like it was back in the day in competitive scene where he got played all the time and a hugely high win rate. It's even more retarded now because he's actually good again, and there's very little counterplay to it. I mean, there's almost none. Like, basically, they said that his ultimate is now he'll take more damage because he doesn't have the passive armor and magic resist, but he'll kill you so fast. And if you're an AD carry that doesn't have an enormously high amount of farm and items at that mid-game period, you are just going to die. You have to rely solely on your AP carry, who may not exist because you might have all AD casters, and you're just fucked. Period. You're basically completely reliant on your team to do anything for most of the game, unless you get super ridiculously fed in bot lane, and that's just not going to happen in many cases, if you're playing against equally skilled opponents. Now, with all that in mind, I still see and have saw threads like Hashinshin boasts on Reign of Gaming, where he argued forever that bruisers are inherently weak, which now especially is not true, and it has a lot to do with the new Trinity Force being so powerful, and some other changes. I don't exactly know. Can't really think of everything that's changed that's put us in this position, but they vehemently argue, no, like, if you're talking about, like, Darius, yeah, you suck. Like, that champion has bad design, and there's a lot of champions that can go against Darius in lane, and he's not a big deal. Because a lot of popular characters right now are AP carries top, and other various characters that do really well against Darius, and Darius sucks in 2v1 lane. That's really the crux of the issue in general, is that a lot of champions that are bad in 2v1 lanes are also really good at dealing with AD carries. So it's not really a problem of bruisers sucking, it's that a lot of them can't be played because of those reasons. But 2v1 laning is becoming a lot less popular because it's so much harder to kill turrets now. So people really have to rethink the strategies and stuff. Like in Worlds, 2v1 laning was a lot less common. People run Singe top. Like, that's another character. AD carries cannot deal with Singed if he gets farmed and fed and stuff like that. There's just nothing, unless you're like Vayne, Twitch, or Corki, or Kog'Maw. Corki doesn't actually scale that well. He's more of a mid-game carry. He's much stronger during that period of the game. He can do an egregious amount of damage during that period of the game, but he's sort of a special case. But regardless of that, still see a lot of people say that AD carries are overpowered, and I literally don't understand. I'm a low diamond player, unfortunately. So I can't say that I'm that good at the game, since because I'm only in Diamond 5, Diamond 4 area most of the time. But with the knowledge I have of the game working as it is, AD carries seem weak in general. Unless somebody wants to point out, oh, there was this Fed Vayne in this one game that one lane, and then she could kill everything because that's how Vayne works. Because if Vayne gets to her late game early, then she's really overpowered because of the way her scalings work. But that's just kind of like Ryze. If a Ryze gets fed early, then he gets to his late game faster, and his late game is retarded, so it's going to kill everything. Oh, yeah, Ryze. Ryze is the reason, with Ryze being nerfed, a lot of the champions that stack armor and are better late game or can kill AD carries are bad against Ryze. So without Ryze being a possible choice against those champions, without Ryze being bad at those champions, or Ryze to be picked against those champions, they're free to be picked, like Olaf or Jax. Jax is not very good in lane against somebody that can just spam spells at range, and Ryze just scales really well. So it's a viable pick, in those situations, because he can just sit and farm, or kill them, for that matter. But still, lower elo players insist that AD carries are too strong. And I wish anybody explain this perception to me, because I just do not understand where this comes from. Or if someone wants to argue that AD carries are really strong right now, I'd like to hear what the argument is for that, because I just don't see where it could be. Because right now, I feel like mid and jungle are the only two lanes that can have any real impact on a game in general, and sometimes top. If a top laner like Nasus gets really fed and wins lane and stuff, then he might have a lot of impact, because he basically can't die and can just walk in team fights, run around and be a god, basically. But if you're like some champions like Jace, even if he wins lane, he can't necessarily help the fact that the rest of the members on his team fed, because he doesn't really do much besides the poke and the team fight presence and helping. He's more supportish. He really helps people if as long as his team did okay. Oh shit, I didn't get the Book of Belial. But mid and jungle are the only roles that seem to have any real impact on games, because AD carries have to wait so long to be any good. They have to wait so long to be any good, and they're weaker than they were in Season 2. That's the thing. It's they're not... It's not they scale into the same power they had before. They're just weaker in general. They're weaker, and it takes longer to get stronger. 100%. I feel like there's just really no argument to be made that AD carries are not weaker. I mean, they made their itemization worse. Bork did not help any. It didn't make AD carries any stronger at all. It's just another choice that you can make to help out some carries, like Vayne, for example, gets a lot of help from that. She can get to her late game faster, but she can still be fucked by Caitlyn and lane and stuff like that. So she's delayed for a while. And that's a gamble. Because in an equally skilled lane, somebody like Caitlyn should be Vayne in the first place. So, what is it about low elo or people in low elo that makes it so AD carries seem like they're too strong and they want nerfs on AD carries? Or is it just that because Vayne and Corki and some Twitch because they sometimes get really strong and stomp, that's their justification for why AD carries are too strong? The Twitch or Vayne going 8-0 in lane and then carrying the game. Is that their only justification? And do you agree in general that AD carries are underpowered? Or would you just say that they're balanced? I think if you want to argue that AD carries are balanced, then you're basically saying that they shouldn't beat AD carries, because they are called marksmen now. They're not AD carries anymore. So because that's the new thing, we're just transitioning to a point where marksmen are just ranged auto attackers, and that's it. They don't carry games. They just do some more damage than some classes with auto attacks. I think that's their role as an ranged auto attack dealer. That scales okay. slightly better than in. I mean, but I feel like a lot of AP carries, like Kale, for instance, can like in late game she can put out an enormous amount of DPS while also bursting down targets really fast too. But she's situationally viable, but still, like, she does not as much DPS as an AD carry. Does a lot though, and it's AoE for that matter. So she just seems more useful in general than an AD carry at this point in the cycle of the game. And I just feel like there's really no solution to it, and I kind of feel like that's where we're moving to. But that it also makes the jungler and the mid lane the only roles that have any real impact. And is that healthy for the game to operate in that manner, especially with jungle? Like, they're talking about giving more gold to an already high impact role, which is really, it seems insane to me when there's a low impact role that barely does what it's supposed to do at this point. And it has a lot to do with itemization for defense being too strong against armor and not strong enough against magic resist. There's not a lot of good magic resist items to choose from. And if you stack MR, then you're weaker against if there was a Zed on the team, or you will actually take more damage from AD carries, which is a lot of the reason I think why Elise and Evelynn Jungler are viable, and running double AP or triple AP is so viable, because it actually allows your AD carry to do damage, which is a novel concept. The only way for your AD carry to do damage is if you completely force the enemy team to not build armor, and that's the only way. There's no other way to get it to happen, which I don't really think is healthy for the game, because really the design intent of AD carries was to be able to do damage to high armor targets, essentially. Maybe not essentially high armor targets, but it's supposed to be able to kill anybody in the game easily. And that just isn't the case at this point, unless you're Vayne or Cog or Twitch. Twitch is sort of more he kills the whole team, not just tanks and stuff. He can spread out his damage really well. His steroid isn't that strong, other than the fact that it hits everybody in the game. And Cog does a lot of extra damage, and so does Vayne. That's the reason why they can actually kill tanks. So, please, I would love to hear why AD carries are actually overpowered and not underpowered. That would be wonderful.